All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 1:55 p.m. Welcome to the Melta 29 International Conference. We will be starting off in 5 minutes' time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the 29th Malta International Conference. I hope you've had your lunch and are ready to journey the next half of the day with us. I'm Dr. Subarna Sivapalan, the Director of Journals at the Malaysian English Language Teaching Association. Now, allow me to share my slides with you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Plenary 1. This session will be from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. And to get the ball rolling, just a few important housekeeping announcements. Firstly, do keep an eye on the chat box for announcement coming in from the Secretariat from time to time. And since this is a plenary session, there will be a Q&A session at 2:45 p.m. And should you have any feedback or questions you would like to pose to the presenter, please feel free to put them in the chat as well. The next one is on e-certificates. So I'm sure you have heard this announcement this morning, but I would like to share this announcement again with you. E-certificates will reach all of you via your inbox from Malta Conference 2021. So please do keep a lookout for your certs coming in through your emails. And lastly, should you have any feedback that you would like to share with us on your experiences with Malta's first ever online conference, please feel free to share them with us through the link or QR code that has been provided in the homepage. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with the housekeeping cleared, let's begin with Plenary 1, shall we? Now, it gives me great pleasure to invite Dr. Azlin Zaiti Zainal, the first plenary speaker. Now, she will be talking to us about teachers' professional development in times of crisis, the role of technology in supporting English language teachers agency in online teaching. Now, before Dr. Azlin begins, allow me to read her bio, yeah? All right. Azlin Zaiti Zainal is a senior lecturer at the English Language Department, Faculty of Languages and Linguistics, University, Malaya. She began her career in English language teaching at Mara Junior Science College, Muar. She then started her academic career at the University of Malaya following completion of her MPhil in English and Applied Linguistics and PhD in Education at Cambridge University. Azlin's research interests include teacher education, technology in language education, second language writing, oral communication, and discourse studies. Her recent research on teacher education, funded by the British Council Assessment Research Grant, investigated the impact of the Pro-ELT training program and APTIS on Malaysian English teachers' classroom practices. Currently, Azlin is the principal investigator of a research project funded by the University of Malaya on the discourses of English language teachers agency in online teaching, with a focus on teachers' professional development. Azlin is our editor-in-chief for Malta's Journal of ELT Research, or MAJA for short. Now, over to you, Azlin.
Thank you, Dr. Subarna, for the introduction. I think I will just prepare my slides for a while. And okay, we are almost good to go. Sorry, can't be multitasking. Hello everyone, good afternoon, Assalamualaikum. I'm very pleased to be here today, and thank you, Malta, for inviting me to present this plenary. So as you can see from the title there, I'm going to present on the topic of teachers' professional development in these challenging times, and focusing on the role of technology in supporting English teachers agency. Okay, the aim of, there are several aims of this plenary. So the main would be to firstly introduce to you the concept of teacher agency. Some of you may be familiar with the concept. Some of you may have heard of the concept but not sure what it actually means. So I will take this opportunity to share with you the concept of agency as proposed by various authors. Secondly, I will share with you what I found about the factors that influence Malaysian English teachers' technology use in online teaching based on research I'm currently doing. Agency and professional development. And finally, I will look at how, teachers can move forward, with the reopening of schools. Currently, we are all under lockdown and we are not really thinking through what should we expect when schools reopen. But this is a serious, something that we need to seriously consider, and I hope that through this plenary, we all have the opportunity to contribute towards this conversation. Okay. Before I start with the notion of agency, I would like to remind us all about how it was like pre-pandemic. The efforts to digitize education is certainly not new. In Malaysia, we have seen various initiatives introduced. For example, smart schools, Frog PLE, and most recently Google Classroom or the Dilemma platform, if I'm not mistaken. So all of these successes. And as we can see, there are various reasons for this, and many scholars have explored the issue as to why technology adoption can sometimes be very, very low amongst teachers. So I would argue that these can be due to the factors such as lack of access to internet connectivity or facilities and geographical locations, among others. So, I did conduct a study with my colleague on this issue, and you may refer to this paper if you're interested to understand how technology adoption takes place in Malaysia. And moving on, that is what we understood of the world before pandemic. But then comes the pandemic, and we are thrust into the world of online teaching. So many parts of the world, as we can see, had to undergo these forced lockdown periods of uncertainties where we don't know when, depending on where you are at the moment, Malaysia. Emergency teaching is something that is common, and it's what we consider as new normal. But then with move towards this online teaching or emergency remote teaching, it is not an easy or straightforward task, because it also requires us to re-examine what is meant by education. What is our professional purpose in education? And what competences are required when we engage in remote online teaching? So while there are many purposes that we can list down out there, I think the most urgent at the moment would be ensuring that quality education can continue to be provided to students. For that to occur, teachers have to rapidly find out ways for them to improve their competences in terms of delivering instruction via remote teaching. Teach remotely using technology, but also how to deliver instruction that actually promotes student engagement. So it is not enough to just, using technology to just use technology for knowledge and skills, using knowledge and skills to understand how to operate technology, but you should also know how it should be used to engage students in their learning. So how do we do that? So various scholars have tried to suggest these competences that are required by teachers. For example, researchers such as, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, Gudmundsdottir and Hartlevik, they suggested several competences that are required in online teaching, beginning with generic digital competence. So basically it's about you have a knowledge of how to use technology, basically, yeah, instrumental skills, and also this, especially when it comes to use of particular software. So teachers may have a preference, or they have developed certain attitudes towards a particular software that they prefer. Yeah. So secondly, it's to do with subject matter digital competence. So it's to do with your knowledge of the subject and how you can deliver instruction using the technologies that you have acquired the competence. And each subject has unique areas that you need to understand how you can deliver these areas of subjects that you, yeah, for example, we have all experienced, I'm assuming that you have all taught English, or if you haven't, you are learning to become English teachers. So there are many aspects of English that you can teach, from the language skills to the language aspects. So how do we deliver, or how do we promote the enhancements of these skills and aspects through the use of technology? So it's a matter of subject matter digital competence. And of course, profession-related digital competence. So it's to do with the translation of knowledge and skills into concrete pedagogical models. So basically, activities, materials, and all. Basically, once you have acquired this basic competence, this generic digital competence, and combined with your subject matter digital competence, how can you actually use those competences in your day-to-day practice? Yeah, in terms of communication, communicating with your peers, communicating with your learners, in terms of online assessment and feedback in a technology-rich environment, and relational skills. So we will see that this is just one model, yeah, of what's required in digital competence. Moving on, we also do see Hempel and Stickler proposing a skills pyramid for online language teaching, starting with basic ICT competence at the very bottom. Quickly go through, yeah, this basic competences up to own style. So basic ICT competence is related to the previous taxonomy, which is generic ICT competence. So basically, it's about how you operate certain tools, such as the computer. Okay, but if you move up one level, you can see that it's to do with specific technical competence for particular software. So this can be any software. Well, I would just choose Google Meet as one example, as it's part of the Google Classroom. It's integrated with the Google Classroom and probably quite relevant to teachers anyway. So the technical competence for using Google Meet is having to understand or know the ways to share screen, for example, or to embed links, or to even use the Jamboard, yeah, to encourage whole class interaction, or to show you and how you actually use for teaching English. But if you move another level, it's dealing with constraints and possibilities of the medium. So this is to do with what are we able to do with the software or platforms such as Google Meet. Are we able to conduct group work using that? I think at the moment we are unable to do so. If you're using the the presenters mode only, meaning you're only using Google Meet for delivering lessons. So the idea of doing group work, which is an activity that I think is very relevant to communicative approach of language teaching, which probably would be very much constrained when you use something like for transmission of content such as Google Meet. So moving up to online socialization, as we said earlier, tools such as Google Meet is very transmission of content. But what about online socialization? Yeah, what about online socialization? So what does this have to do with online teaching? Well, basically, Hempel and Stickler they are suggesting that socialization is very critical for language acquisition, because through interaction and socialization, learners can acquire the language. And of course, if we move up the communicative competence level up there, you can see that it's about how teachers are able to go beyond the basic competences to facilitate communicative competence by using authentic tasks. Okay, and if we move up another level, you can see that teachers have creativity and choice there. Creativity and choice here would depend a lot on whether or not teachers have been exposed to, a number of applications want to choose and to use their own creativity, not be prescribed by go beyond what is expected by the use of the technology, and be able to use their creativity and make choices. And finally, moving up to the final level up there, it's to do with teacher's own style. What is the style that the teacher can bring into their online lesson once they are doing online teaching and learning? So this, I think, could be a good potential framework for us to look at where we are at the moment. But of course, it's not without criticism. As we can see, researchers such as Compton, he argues that the online language tutor should know how to facilitate language acquisition rather than online socialization. So this means that even if online socialization is one way of us promoting language acquisition, this should while learner-learner interaction is very critical and very crucial, it's very important that the teacher should also be aware of other means, focusing on areas such as curriculum, tasks, and delivery methods for the teacher to be able to promote language acquisition. So worry not, just because you can't do online socialization or online teaching doesn't mean you can't promote language acquisition. So basically, teachers are doing what they can to actually promote language acquisition, but not necessarily relying on online socialization. So basically, the point here we can make is that there needs to be a repertoire of strategies in implementing emergency remote teaching, and it should not be restricted to online teaching only. So we shall see what is meant by this repertoire of strategies, when I look at the data. So to learners through emergency remote teaching, but we are faced with the reality that not all our learners have the devices or have internet data or sufficient data. The fact that they have to share with their siblings, or the fact that they have to wait for their parents to come back from work to be able to use handphones or the computer. So if we refer to the research by the Education Ministry, almost 40% of students nationwide at the time do not possess any electronic devices. But of course, this research was done last year, and it was this is from NST. So you can see how this is actually affecting online teaching and learning. And teachers, although they are very excited, what I mean by excited is they are keen. Once they have all this knowledge, what do they do now when they're faced with this situation? What is it's meant by agency here? So agency has been defined as individual characteristic previously in the psychological literature. So as you can see, agency, as proposed by Bandura, is the capacity to exercise control over the nature and quality of one's life. Or another definition provided by Bandura is the human capability to exert influence over one's functioning and the course of events by one's actions. From these definitions, we can see that it seems like the person is the individual is very much in control. And when they are very much in control, it means that they have the ability, they have the capacity to actually influence the actions taken. But more recently, perspectives from sociological, socio-cultural, and also pragmatic perspectives. And for the purpose of today's talk, I would choose to look at agency in terms of its action. And we cannot, I mean, while agency can be viewed as a capability or a capacity, we cannot somehow separate that from their work or the individual situation or the work environment. So as you can see the quote from Etelapelto et al., you can see professional agency is practiced when teachers and all communities in schools influence, make choices, and take stances in ways that affect their work and professional identity. So in other words, as much as we are able or capable, uh, somehow the work environment, the contextual influences would somehow affect work. So we will look at how scholars have conceptualized agency within the ecological framework. So if we look at the ecological model of teacher agency, which is grounded in the pragmatic area of agency, so you can see that agency has been defined as agency as being defined as being influenced by a configuration of temporal and relational factors. So in other words, like I said earlier, agency, while you are being capable or incapable, there's a lot of influences that may be from the temporal or relational factors, and we will see some of these factors later. And of course, how teachers experience, their experience is really somewhat related to temporal and environment contribute to the achievement of agency. And they are scholars iterational, projective, and practical evaluative. We shall see, we will look at these separately. And the iterational dimension, you can see, is the role of thoughts and actions accumulated from the past that form patterns that affect present activities. So basically, what you have been doing, what your experiences about teaching and learning, your training, your background, your beliefs, your values may have bearing on your actions, your current actions. Secondly, the projective dimension, which is to do with aspirations, what you imagine, what you aspire to be or aim to be, whether it's short term or long term, may influence a person's action and in relation to the possible trajectories of one's future. So if you are a language teacher, maybe you want to get another degree and you will be working towards that degree, but for long or your professional development. So that's the projective dimension. But what about the practical evaluative dimension? So this is the present, the ability of the actor in making decisions based on alternatives available. So like I said earlier, teachers are bounded by the context where they work, the structural, cultural, material factors would always affect the way they approach their task and their behaviors. So as we look at this, we can also see how these factors can enable or constrain their behavior. And while we are in the present, which is the practical evaluative dimension, it's also possible for us to go back and refer to the iterational and also to the projective, which is how we do certain things and our aspirations in the future. Okay, so these concepts have been further explored by researchers, the original researchers on adoption of agency through agency dimensions. They start with the iterational, practical evaluative, and the projective. So if you look at the left-hand side of this diagram, you can see these concepts that I mentioned earlier on the left-hand side. But on the right-hand side, we can see the arrow moving up there. So basically, we are expecting when teachers engage in new activities, new approaches, new tools, they can either go up or they can either go low in terms of the transformation, because teachers might display these characteristics in low transformative agency, or they might assess, moving up the second level, they might assess the current actions and they might see, hey, this is a good way to improve my teaching and my students' learning, so I might as well adopt this. Moving up, going up, and you can see high transformative agency. So thinking of more further actions on how to improve future practices. So you begin with looking at where you are at the moment and thinking, once you are learning new items, learning new tools, specific pedagogical approaches, you have to see where you are at within that category. Are we willing to take the necessary step towards transformation, or do we stay within the safe boundaries of existing role of doing the same thing? I'm leaving this open. I'm not. And we can see that, as I said earlier, authors interested or scholars interested in these components have explored these further and have come up with extensive models of agency. Say, for example, if you look at this one, I will not be detailing this too much, but I would just like to highlight where this iterational, practical, evaluative, and projective dimensions are within this framework. Yeah. So you can see here some examples provided here. So iterational would refer to your own training, your own history about learning a language. It could be about your own approach to using technology. And of course, practical evaluative would be the current situation, where you are at within your classroom, how you would incorporate cultural, structural, and of course, what is available within your environment, the material resources. And finally, if you look at what you aim in the future as an actor within this framework, whether it's a short-term or it's a long-term goal, and should you be able to maneuver, manage, negotiate these elements within this framework, it shows this enactment of agency down here. Okay, so don't be scared with this framework here, because we have another one. Okay, this is even more extensive. As you can see in the literature, I mean, scholars have been interested in this notion of agency, especially so now that with the COVID-19 pandemic, we are very much reliant on our own agentic potential to realize online teaching and learning. So I will not be spending too much time on this framework either, but you can see that scholars have actually expanded the elements further, looking at how knowledge, beliefs, values actually affected both personal and professional, affected teachers' professional competence within the iterational column. And again, the practical evaluative column here, this box here, again refers to the present. So you're evaluating your professional situation, what cultural, structural, material conditions are enabling or constraining, and you interpret in such a way that you're able to make decisions and which results in certain behavior in classroom or in online teaching. And again, this would also have some bearing towards the middle box here, the projective. For example, how do you see technology being used in the future? Do we need to further our skills, further improve our skills, our pedagogical approaches using technology? Get in touch with others, yeah, to socialize about these methods of online teaching and learning. So when we look at this framework, these components, we can see how agency is not just a matter of the individual exercising their agency, because they are influenced by these components. And sorry, I need to explain the most recent thoughts about agency. While previously, the researchers previously did not really highlight the constraints, we see Damsa et al. Actually highlighted certain constraints. And I think it's very interesting to look at their perception of what agency is composed of. Yeah. So it's actually a series of ostensible actions. So when they say ostensible actions, it's about agency without the ideal that you want to achieve. In an ideal situation, you would expect that you will be able to use technology tools with all students attending, and we are able to do online assessment without any problems of students not being able to participate. But this is not the reality of most any situations of online teaching. So the authors actually look at occlusive dimensions. So you can still see occlusive here. It's not about realizing the ideal, but rather being able to work with the condition and realizing your agency within the constraints of that condition. So if you look here, again, what I introduced to you earlier, the iterational is there. Yeah, the practical evaluative in the middle, the projective transformative agency was upwards there. So with the bottom being not so much change, the middle, we see some hope of change. Finally, projective transformative agency with change taking place, moving upwards here. Yeah, but then of course, like we said earlier, we might be governed by occlusive agency or ostensible agency with low constraints, perhaps helping us to achieve this ostensible agency, but high constraints, yeah, the ideal that we wish to achieve with all students being able to attend our class may not be a reality. So this, you can still display some kind of agency, but this is what we call occlusive agency. So now I will quickly go through what the research on teachers' agency is all about. Firstly, the recent study on teachers' agency, I think conducted by Tamvichit in Thailand, we could see that it's not easy for teachers to actually exercise their agency, and help, yeah, through institutions and government support. And also, there's a bit of hope there, because you should never give up on communicative approaches despite the difficulties they may encounter. As we said earlier, sometimes it's difficult to replicate what teachers are used to doing in online environment. Say, for example, if teachers are used to doing group work, which is reflective of communicative language teaching, perhaps this might be a constraint on their agency. But as we shall look at later, we do see a lot of collaboration with colleagues in this time of crisis. So I will just share a bit with you my findings from my current study on the discourses of teacher and learner agency in the ecology of online learning. So what I'm presenting today is just part of the findings. And I conducted interviews with my co-researchers, teachers, with the online teaching. So teachers come from different geographical locations. So it's more of teachers that whom we know and we contacted. Yeah, it's not basically it's more of a convenience sampling in the sense rather than a random sampling. But you can see the experience range from 20 years to 5 years, and teachers are from mainly daily schools. Yeah. So, like I said earlier, it's important to actually look at teachers' competence pre-pandemic. So a number of these teachers actually reported that they hardly use ICT in classroom because the many hassles involved, such as having to bring your laptop, having to set up projectors. They might use occasionally, yeah, to show YouTube videos, to do quizzes in class using Kahoot, or they might take students to the computer lab, but computer you have a book and considering other subjects as well. So teachers are actually generally pre-pandemic they did not usually use ICT that much. Some may have, but majority didn't. Okay, and in terms of iterational dimension that we mentioned earlier, so some teachers actually did mention that they were introduced to the Google Classroom, the Dilemma platform pre-pandemic, but they did not really use. Maybe they use occasionally to post assignments, but it's not part of their teaching, their common teaching strategies. So we can see teacher Trisha. Trisha here, one of the teachers, she felt that when she was asked to do online teaching, it was a big challenge. Yeah, it's a big challenge. It was like starting from zero for her, although she was familiar with Google Classroom because she did attend training on that, but it was a totally new area for younger, and she's used to using PowerPoint slides in her lessons. So for her, it was not so much of a challenge in the sense that the teacher only felt that she had to adapt a bit, but it wasn't something that caused her anxiety because for her it's a matter of learning new online methods, and she just needed to adapt what she would regularly use in classroom, for example, PowerPoint slides. She can easily transfer to video conferencing, except that, of course, pointing gestures, what she would normally do in classroom, would be replaced with highlighters, for example. Okay, so yes, like I said earlier, teachers actually used ICT in various forms, but not regularly. So teachers have shown some kind of agency. Teacher bought, and I say bought, teacher actually went out all the way to buy their own projector rather than relying on department projectors. So that's actually an practical evaluative dimension. Teachers' professional development of online teaching is one of the areas that we will look at, and also their use of technology in online teaching. So if we look at this pandemic, it's amazing to see that this is the time that everyone is actually using technology in online teaching, even if it's the most simplest tool, like using social messaging tool. It's still considered a change from pre-pandemic. So the pandemic has acted as a catalyst, yeah, for teachers to actually enact their agentic potential. Okay, and they did so by using technology, because technology here plays a role. And you can see here that from their interviews that they use technology for self-learning, peer learning, yeah, learning from their peers, and also from the larger community of practice. For example, all names are anonymized there, so these are not actual teacher names. YouTube actually helps a lot for her. At the moment, we have Google Classroom and so on. I learned mostly from YouTube. So I believe that self-learning, self-taught methods are quite common among teachers in this time of challenging times. And of course, we have teacher Afida, who actually attended the Melta webinar for ESL. She was able to learn lots of approaches and was given shared resources and materials to use. But of course, all these resources, teachers, remember, we need to make interpretation of what we are able to do or not able to do with our learners in the classroom. So here we can see that teachers are engaged in self-learning and interpretation. And of course, the other practical evaluative dimension would be the professional learning communities. If we can see, this is a structure in place which teachers actually use a lot of in the school, and they would share new knowledge about new apps or new ways of using apps, yeah, or sharing resources, such as the one where teacher Madiha here mentioned how she shared resources with her teachers in her school. And of course, from communities of practice, so it's also quite common for teachers. Yeah, teachers went to great lengths to join Telegram channel. Yeah, for in the case of teacher Salina or teacher Nora, she explained that she would join webinars hosted by PKGs, not only in her district, but also beyond other states as well. So that is an example of teacher agency that we see in these teachers. And in terms of digital tools, we can see that teachers reported to have used for online teaching Google Meet, Google Classroom, Google Forms, Telegram, WhatsApp, others. Okay, I will not detail how these teachers use this because it would take pandemic, something that we would never imagine teachers using before. Yeah, so Google Meet probably to actually share content, Google Classroom to post, mark assignments, Google Forms, yeah, Telegram for sharing resources, okay, WhatsApp to communicate with learners and all these others, okay, as you can see. And of course, exercise of agency by teachers could not be possible without some help. So the Ministry of Education somehow provided some structure, yeah, some structure in terms of online, offsite, and offline and on-site. So the structural conditions are in place in the form of how teachers should teach remotely. So when it comes to online, of course, the live interaction through Google Meet, the offline teachers might assign work to them on site is another condition that we also see, especially in rural areas, where teachers had to print out materials, or the school prepared printed materials, and these have to be to work on these materials at home because they do not have access to technology. So how do we provide quality education when the situation is like this, especially to a majority of learners in rural areas? Yeah. So again, if we refer to this diagram, again, teachers are constrained, but nevertheless, they have shown some kind of agency here, more occlusive type of agency, despite facing these high constraints on the right-hand side there. Yeah. So, for example, Shahida here, she actually used Telegram. She rarely used Google Meet because students would not be able to join her class if she were to use Google Meet all the time. So Telegram was very useful because with low internet data and lack of maybe internet access is not very stable. Yeah. Okay. And then of course, some teachers had to abandon what they used to do before, such as doing group work. So perhaps she could still exercise agency in transmitting her knowledge about language learning, but group work is probably not easy for her to do, especially when students cannot join any online lessons. And teacher Nora, who actually used group work normally in physical classroom, she had to change. She used a lot of Google Meet, but also she used her Google Forms, more Google Forms, which helped to analyze her student responses, which is very good actually because it automates the process of marking, so you do not have to mark. students' work, and you could see which questions learners get wrong, which questions learners get right, and which areas can be improved on. And of course, the issues that we mentioned earlier, issues related due to the issues mentioned earlier. And of course, this off-site mode involved you going beyond online teaching because it requires you as a teacher to consider other means such as printed modules. But of course, the constraint would be students would miss out on any whole class interaction or learner-learner interaction. And of course, we do see how teachers see this time as very challenging and the need to adapt and consider learners so that they won't be demotivated when they participate. So it's very important to consider students' well-being because we don't really see them with them being behind the screens and all that, yeah. And another teacher mentioned about getting learners prepared for this mode of teaching that is not just about what they understood before, which is physical classroom. So you should not be relying on just what can be provided using textbooks and other ways of learning or acquiring language. And of course, another teacher, Alana, she actually felt that the students should take ownership of their learning. Yeah, so ownership of learning is clearly very important in times of crisis like this. And we do see teachers trying to engage with learners, but of course not from Afida's experience, but her understanding of what teachers have been doing. Yeah, the use of Facebook, the use of TikTok to record themselves. I think maybe it's something that we could all consider if we want to engage learners. So all the teachers interviewed, in terms of projective dimension, all the teachers interviewed actually stated that they would like to learn more about technology for future use. But how do they perceive the role of technology post-pandemic? Let's see some of the excerpts here. For Salina, I mean, she does see there's a role for technology, but more as a supplementary to face-to-face teaching. To give extra work. Laila, for example, think that it can be helpful, especially if teachers have to be away, so teachers can record and attend courses. And Afida thinks online teaching will still be relevant in the future to serve as a backup plan in times of crisis. So in other words, teachers do see the role of technology, but it's not very clear at the moment how this technology can be used post-pandemic. So moving forward, we can see that from what I shared just now within this short session, teachers had to manage a number of digital tools considering their unique contextual situations. And how do we move forward now that we know that these are some of the constraints, and how do we move forward with the reopening of schools? Because we could see that teachers have demonstrated their achievement of agency. They could see the affordances of the tool, of specific tool. For example, that Google Meet to deliver her lessons. And then the structure provided by the school was actually very helpful, and we can see that there should be this support, from schools or external stakeholders, and ensure that students are able to continue their education. So moving forward, I'm coming towards the end of my talk here, plenary here. So we can see that teachers' enactment of agency is evident in times of crisis. You can see teachers have attempted ways to actually increase their digital competence, and we have seen new ways of doing things, although these have to be according to their own context. So with the reopening of schools, how can we, as educators, move forward? This is the situation, at least in secondary schools, one scenario where it's impossible to do group work when you. But yes, this is a potential scenario out there. So moving forward, I think it's important to build resilience. They should, teachers, educators should continue to be supported in their ongoing professional development. I mean, what the external stakeholders, the PKGs, Melta, and any training providers, ELTC, have all been offering lots of webinars, courses to help teachers, which is good. And then we should not forget the PLCs, professional learning communities, to think about how we can move forward, meaning it's not just a matter of sharing of apps or resources, what strategic plans can we develop incorporating technologies in the teaching and learning or the curriculum. Now, of course, the conversations or dialogues should not end with the reopening of schools. We should continue to think about and of course, we should remind ourselves that use of technology should not be prescriptive, but in ways that would actually help enhance teachers' agency and professional purpose. And if we can somehow look at the patterns of teachers' use of technology, there should be a consideration of the multimodality of the tools in delivery of lessons. And consider using technology for formative assessments, because this seems to help teachers to quickly identify areas of weaknesses or areas of improvement. To understand and provide differentiation, I think it's very important to understand our learners and to be able to assist or facilitate their learning through differentiation, and to enhance, finally, student ownership of their learning. So we should not be going back to, which is common sometimes, to have autonomous and to take ownership of their learning. So with that, I thank you and I welcome any questions that you may have about this plenary. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Azleen. That was a wonderful session. How are you feeling?
Okay, I think I was rushing through a bit towards the end, but I think generally okay.
Yes, no worries, no worries. We have about 7 minutes for Q&A, and questions are pouring in, but unfortunately I can't ask them all. So I'm just gonna, in the next 7 minutes or so, maybe 2 or 3 questions, Dr. Azleen, if that's okay with you. So the first one is, teachers are often at the receiving end of instructions from school heads, district education officers, and even the Ministry of Education. Do you think instructions negatively impact teacher agency? If so, what is the possible solution?
Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, we can't avoid structures because these are conditions that are imposed top-down, but we may use it to our advantage. These instructions, while policies sometimes are imposed top-down, we can't somehow get away from them and we are expected to implement, but we can somehow exercise our agency by having these courses with fellow teachers. For example, I mentioned the professional learning communities. Perhaps there should be more debates amongst teachers, and especially now because social media is so common to use to share views, to share everything can be viral so fast these days. So I don't see agency as being constrained with this age of social media. So yes, top-down implementation will remain at the we do need some kind of guidelines, and yes, that's the role of the ministry. But I wouldn't say that by receiving these instructions, it should constrain teachers' agency. To some extent, it may, but it's not like teachers do not have a choice. Teachers can still exercise the agency, apply this first with their learners, see whether or not learners are able to somehow be responsive towards this new policy or new directives. But if not, then I think it depends on the teachers collectively to think and to discuss within the platforms that have been shared, that have been somehow enacted. For example, the PLCs, which I think is a very good platform for teachers. Yeah, the professional learning communities in schools. So I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Aslin. So one final question, because we've got only 5 minutes left. So this question is regarding the expanded ecological model of agency that you shared with us just now. And the question is, what are our teachers' level of agency in adapting to the current teaching and learning approaches in the new normal? So I guess the question is, if you can place where our teachers currently are based on the model.
Okay, if you were to ask me, I would say that teachers have demonstrated high agentic transformative agency. If you refer to what they were like before, meaning when previously teachers were not using technology, that's one. Now teachers are actually using a variety of technologies. That's agency in the sense of changing their mode. But there's also another level, because are they able to implement technology in ways that transform their practice? Centered, are they able to move beyond teacher-centered approaches and actually give power to their students? So in terms of modes, I would say that teachers have shown their agentic potential, meaning they have taken ownership of their learning, they have joined communities, they have discussed with their fellow teachers. In that sense, there was some display, I mean, at least from the teachers that I interviewed, display of agency, but there are constraints. Yeah, there are constraints affected by these constraints, perhaps. Yeah. Yes. So in this situation, I would say teachers have been given some kind of leniency as well. Schools are, while there is structure, meaning you have to make sure you report what you did this week. You have to show how many students attended. Yeah, there is that kind of structure. You cannot avoid that. Otherwise, we wouldn't do. Choice. Yeah, for example, the use of Telegram just now instead of using Google Meet. Okay. So I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Aslin. So unfortunately, I'm getting stern warning from our host at the back there to quickly wrap up the session. So thank you so much for your wonderful insight during your plenary one session today. And, from all of us at the Melta family, thank you once again, Dr. Aslin, for being with us today from 2 to 3 p.m. And to all listening in, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are just done with plenary 1, but the day is not over. So please proceed to track 2, which starts at 3:10 p.m. So don't leave yet, yeah? 3:10 p.m. is when track 2 starts. And allow me also to just share with you that Melta journals, the English teacher and Maja are open for submissions. So please, feel free to send in submissions to us. And there's no payment involved, yeah, when you submit to Melta Journals. So we hope to receive lots of publications from you through the online platform, which is available at meltajournals.com, yeah. So thank you again, everybody, for being with us and enjoy the rest of the session. See you in track 2. Bye.
Established in 1996, NISI Group is an educational organisation using technologies to provide an inclusive, social and student-focused environment that welcomes learners of all backgrounds. We offer effective and innovative ways of providing our students with a holistic learning experience. All registered schools within NISI are Ofsted inspected, courses accredited by awarding bodies including Cambridge. We are one of a small number of approved Cambridge International schools offering selected Cambridge courses online around the world. We offer NISI Learning and the NISI Virtual Academy, which give traditional and non-traditional learners the skills to flourish through innovative education and by influencing positive institutional change. Our courses are taught by experienced teachers with courses accredited by OCR, Cambridge and NOCN. Units of Sound is a computer-based program designed to help struggling readers with their reading and spelling skills. The software includes screening, which assesses pupils' progress and places them at an appropriate level, and also provides printable records for teachers. NISI Skills Academy supports students in completing their apprenticeship with recognised vocational and academic qualifications by working with local providers to create programs that meet industry requirements. We ensure our students are prepared for employment. NISI Education Trust exists to answer emerging questions around maximising the potential of learning in a post-industrial education system. We connect research and practice where innovation can take place and where proof of concepts can be worked through. Furthermore, we have a clear focus on maximising the potential of those who are unable to access the current system. Since our inception, our programs have impacted students, parents, schools and communities in many different countries where we operate. Our mission is to provide the best possible education to traditional and non-traditional learners worldwide. In Asia, we have representatives in Japan, Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Bangladesh and Indonesia. Over the past 2 decades, NISI has developed an extensive network of like-minded organisations to share experience, ongoing development and collaborations for the benefit of our students. We are currently seeking school, universities and third sector organisations interested in building innovative partnerships. We look forward to supporting you in your plans for delivering quality inclusive education and training. Visit nisi.com for the most up-to-date information and get in touch.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I am Dr. Jane Cheok, and I am from the Form 6 College in Malacca. Today, I'll be your moderator for today's featured workshop. We are very honored to have a speaker from the NISI Group who will be sharing with us some online learning activities. But before that, I would like to share a little bit about Laura Brown. Laura Brown has her degree, a joint honors in history and education studies. And since then, she has been attached in NISI since 2010. Laura has been involved in a number of development projects, educational projects, involving new products and innovations for teaching and learning. She has worked alongside UK and international partners in launching a number of new projects involving academic subjects and skills development. Laura has also recently published an article for an ADB publication focusing on innovations in technical and vocational study. Currently, Laura is completing a postgraduate qualification in education and leadership. Now, as you listen to Laura, if you have any questions or any thoughts to share with her, you may post in the chat box. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laura Brown.
Thank you for that introduction, and good afternoon, everybody, and good morning from the UK. The theme of today's session is the use of pedagogy within an online education setting. And so we are going to consider different ways in which that can be used, and also making a comparison with a mainstream classroom where you will be able to hopefully think about your own techniques and other ways in which you can use these theories. So when considering the use of pedagogy within an online education setting, there are two main areas to think about. Who are we teaching to, and what are we teaching? So first of all, let's consider our audience, our students, the Generation Z. Taking it back, millennials or Generation Y, who were born during the 80s and the 90s, had to develop. They had to see the introduction of technology, see how that's growing, and adapt to a lot of that. It increased global communication, global awareness, and also made us think about diversity and inclusion, and how that can be part of our everyday culture. That change meant that education was adapting, and yet technology didn't fully deliver any further education. It didn't play a part in every lesson. But our Generation Z, those born from 1996 onwards, have to accept technology within every aspect of their life. They are the first generation to never know the world without that technology, without the internet. Every other area of life has now adapted to include technology and to have online communication. Education is the last of the major areas to actually embrace this education, to think about how delivery can be improved through the use of an online method. You can see your doctor online. Surgery can be completed using robotics and technology, and yet education has stayed mainly as it always has been. We've been, for around about 25 years now, trying to improve the use of education and technology, and we are starting to see an acceptance of this, but we've still got a long way to go. Thinking further then about our students and what we know about them, including some of their formative experiences and also what they may want in the future, gives us as teachers the opportunity to adapt and to ensure that every lesson is reflective for them and for their needs. Our Generation Z, our current students, they are looking for security and stability in the future. They're not looking to all go to space and all of them to make a major difference. They want their own personal security. And so the skills and the knowledge that we teach them has to reflect what they are hoping to achieve. Technology has developed to the point now that it is everywhere. You can wear your technology. You've got 3D printing. Every job that you go into will have an aspect of technology within it. And so we should be using education to ensure that our learners are best prepared for that, that when they go into the workplace, they have the technological skill to be able to compete with other people hoping to achieve that same job. Communication, they are used to across technological platforms, thinking about a global situation. They are able to talk to people in every other country using platforms that are already in place through social media and gaming and all of those things. The learners are very well equipped, and maybe it's more of the teachers that need to consider the use of technology. So that's who we're teaching to. Considering then online learning and the changes that that has faced, even over the last couple of years, there have been some big steps. So prior to the pandemic, online learning wasn't fully considered by everybody. It was seen as an alternative, but not the best choice. It wasn't necessarily understood by all teachers in particular, but also local governments or the students themselves. There is a difference in online learning, just as there is with mainstream learning. Yes, you can get programs that you teach to yourself that don't support you in the way that a mainstream class would, but there are also programs where you have got teacher support, where you have got expert advice that can deliver to students just as successfully, if not better, than a mainstream school can. During all of the lockdowns around COVID-19, we saw across the world online learning develop. Schools had to adapt. Online learning had to take place for students to continue their education safely. Mindsets had to be adapted. Resources had to be created. People became a lot more accepting of online learning and the benefits that it has to be able to access the students who would struggle to get a quality education elsewhere. We have been proud of the way that we've adapted to the COVID-19 situation, where we've not missed a single hour of learning. Our students have continued to access their education without the same level of disruption as the mainstream students have been facing. And then that leads us to hopefully the end of this pandemic in the not too distant future, and what that means for online learning. We would like it to continue. We hope that people have accepted the benefits of online learning, have seen that alternatives are there, because not every learner will thrive in a mainstream school. Sometimes an online setting would be better suited for them. We can take the strengths of a classroom and we can have that within an online classroom. There doesn't have to be a difference. It doesn't have to be a them and us situation. We are all teaching. We are all hoping to develop students, to bring them forward and to give them the best outcomes. As there are different learning styles, there are different teaching styles, and that can include the use of technology. So that brings us to how we teach that in a physical manner and the use of pedagogy. With this, I want to go through a variety of different pedagogical styles, think about what they might mean, and then how we can embrace that in an online setting. So what is it? How do we use it? The way in which we teach is our pedagogy. The way that we engage students. It's something that we do every day as teachers, and yet we don't always think about it. We don't always put it to the forefront of our planning. So it's the method and the practice of teaching. It's the theory and the practice of learning. It's how it's important. It's what the students develop and gain. It's influenced by the learners. We always have to adapt during lessons. We have to make sure that our students are taking from that lesson everything we want them to. And so if the learners aren't engaging the way that we hoped, we make a change. It's the way that we impart knowledge and skills. And quite simply, it is the art of teaching. It's not something that everybody can do. It's not something that comes naturally to many others. It is a skill, it is an art. And our pedagogy is the one that gets us to where we want to be. Within planning, we consider what tasks we're going to complete. We think about how we are going to assess our learners, but do we really consider the way that we're going to teach them? About the different styles that we can use, about the best way to engage a particular group of students. So as with every element of our planning within education, the important part is the outcome for the student of what they will ultimately take away from that lesson. Our pedagogy has to reflect the needs of the student, the learning styles of the student, and what the result should be. So by considering pedagogy when we are planning, we can ensure that the quality of the teaching stays high. If we have good quality teaching, then the outcomes are likely to be better. If students are able to engage in their education, their outcomes are likely to be better. If we are allowing for diversity and inclusivity for different learning styles and abilities, then students will progress and their outcomes will be better. Not only will they be able to develop curriculum knowledge, they will also develop their cognitive skills, allowing them to reach the higher level skills. So through Bloom's, you are hoping to evaluate and analyze, not just recall. The ability to take information and question it will allow students to continue to progress. It's the teaching style that can ensure that students do all of these things and that they get the best from their time in education. So there are 5 main pedagogical approaches to consider. We've got constructivist, collaborative, integrative, reflective, and inquiry-based learning. You may recognise some of these. They may be terms that you don't know. And when we come to look at them in practice, you might recognise it from your own styles. And we might think about new things that we can introduce to our own teaching and how that can benefit our students further. So first up, we are considering the theory of constructivist pedagogy. So this is based on the idea that humans will build knowledge, and they will do that through experience rather than having an abstract theory taught to them. It may be that you're getting students up and doing rather than sitting with a textbook. To be able to see a real life experience, to show how that will go on to affect their day-to-day life. So through that picture, instead of teaching about profit and loss, give them an experience such as the cupcake sale, where they can consider the monetary value, what money they've made, how much they have to pay out. You can use real life situations. It may be a case of considering the views of your learner or their own interests and engaging them through your lesson with that. So you might be trying to teach them about percentages and being able to use that as saving money is always a helpful one. Ways that they can see that they're learning it for a reason can help them to engage further. It can also help in a more holistic manner, as they are able to bring together different ideas rather than having addition and subtraction and then having percentages as 2 separate entities. They can bring those together and see how they combine. The construction of different views and different ideas, building knowledge naturally, rather than reading information about one area, putting it to the side and then moving on to the next topic. It allows them to continually recall that knowledge and then engage in that further. For collaborative pedagogy, we have students working together on activities or smaller tasks to work as a collective. Again, this is effective as they are building skills, teamwork skills, communication skills, coming together to share that final outcome. They can either work on separate tasks and reflect back to the rest of the class, or you can break down a larger activity into small tasks where they then rely on each other. Again, I'm sure that there are ways in which you have adapted this theory within your own teaching to consider teamwork and, again, the engagement of the students. If they are part of a team, they can't let their teammates down. And they're also more likely to be seen, so they can't hide behind the louder or more confident members of the group. With our integrative pedagogy, we are considering how prior knowledge and experiences will combine with new knowledge and experiences. So again, real-life applications and how that can all build to significant learning. When we start a topic, it doesn't have to just be a case of here is the information. You think about what's already known. Think about the learning styles of each student. Think about the ways in which that can adapt to a real life situation. Think about any particular views or cultures that may be affected by this. And all of that coming together will allow for the most effective teaching and learning. There are some similarities between these different styles, so there is a lot of collaboration within an integration. And as with any attempt to give the best for the students, a little bit of each style will be beneficial. Some students will react better to one than another. We have then reflective pedagogy, which is more about self-questioning, self-discovery. You will think about the reasons why you made certain choices, why you did certain things. That can include your use of language. Think about any conscious or unconscious bias, how your own experiences influence your teaching, whether that is positive or negative, how you can adapt and bring about a better lesson for your students next time around. Constantly evaluating what you have achieved, what you've done, and how you can improve. We are able to reflect on ourselves and our own abilities, but that behaviour can then be modelled by our students. So if they see us reflecting, then they can begin to self-reflect as to how they can develop, how they can achieve more. We, as teachers, are very critical of ourselves. We think about what we achieve and what we could do differently next time. And this is where the reflective pedagogy comes in. And the final one is inquiry-based learning. So this time we are thinking about a series of questions, of problems that we pose to the students. And we get them to investigate. Again, increasing engagement, thinking about differences, thinking about research, thinking about skills. They are able to build knowledge. They're able to find that out for themselves. and therefore build confidence. They are able to work with their peers. And again, elements of a communication will come across all of these. So they are our 5 main pedagogical styles. They are things that can be included to every classroom. Using a variety allows for students to get the best of each. They will react better to one than others, and differentiation will help to keep them engaged. Everything we do has the student at the centre. Their outcomes, what they achieve, how we prepare them for the next step. So it will guide the students through their learning. Any choice that we make is important. It's seen by the student. So our behaviour, as well as what we say, makes a difference. It can help to stimulate their development. It can give them, in the short term, knowledge. In the long term, it can give them a love for learning. If our lessons are interesting and engaging, they want to be there, they want to be part of it. If they don't engage with their lessons, they're not going to want to continue. A love for learning will allow them to push to higher levels and will help them to go on to change the world in the future. They have to enjoy the process. And if we make the wrong choices, that might stop them from developing in the way that they are capable of. So the way that we teach is going to be vital. It improves not only knowledge, which they will need for their progression in their qualifications and their examinations, but also their skills. And those skills can go on to be used in different areas of their lives. It can have an impact on what they go on to do in the future for studying as well as for work and their lifestyle. If we teach them about respect, then they will go on to respect others. So it is part of everything that we do. So the big question then is, what makes a good pedagogue? What do we need to do to ensure that we are giving the best for our students, that we are working effectively? And ultimately we have some steps to take. So we need to be warm, approachable and open. Think about enthusiasm. If we are enthusiastic, if we're excited to be in the lesson, then the students will be too. They can pick up on our own views. Teamwork is a priority. Students will again be able to model what they see and what they are encouraged to do. If they develop teamwork skills as part of their learning, they can use that in their future practice. They can go on to the workplace and consider the way in which they work with their colleagues. We can work as a team with our colleagues, then they can too. A good pedagogue will be supportive of the students and again their colleagues. It's important that we get the best out of everybody and that we can help where possible. And then we consider time management. This is vital. We know that there is a lot of curriculum knowledge to share. We might have to do that many different times in many different ways to allow for the learners with different learning styles to all achieve what they need to. So this is not an easy thing to incorporate. We would also consider ourselves to be a lifelong learner. We're always trying to improve. If we consider reflective pedagogy, that is a form of lifelong learning. What can you take from that lesson? What have you discovered as part of that delivery? We want to improve. We want to get better. We're not happy to just stick to one thing as it may not be working. Our students change and we have to change to meet their needs. Okay. So can it be replicated online? You may have recognized many different elements from your own teaching within that rundown, but can we do this online? In short, yes, we can. There is the opportunity for everything to be repeated in exactly that same way with an online lesson. A teacher is a teacher, no matter what physical location they are in. The ability to progress for the learners is still at the core. So yes, all of this can be used for online education. That can include constructive, collaborative, integrative, reflective, and inquiry-based learning. So if we think about our constructivist pedagogy for online, we can think about additional tools and real-life experiences from around the world that can be used to build knowledge. We are constructing based on all of the information that is now available to us through the internet. So as an example, you could be looking at climate change within science. So instead of just reading about climate change, about using a textbook to see how climate change has built through the years, what the results could be, we can consider a more engaging way to deliver that lesson using a constructive pedagogy and cross-curricular links. We can have students investigate climate change. So instead of reading textbook, they can read news articles. They can think about ways in which this is happening in the real world. We may be able to have photos from around the world to show some of the changes that have been made due to climate change. They can take that information to then evaluate results, creating graphs and charts to be able to present that information to the teacher and to the other students. Just because we are not in a physical classroom with all students together doesn't limit the way in which this can be used. In fact, it opens many more doors. Having learners from different countries working together means that they can share information, share their real life experiences, and build on their knowledge, their views. In terms of collaborative pedagogy, again, we can think about group work exactly as you would in a mainstream classroom. We have parts of technology, which means that we can introduce breakout rooms for students who work in smaller groups. They can also continue to communicate outside of the lesson using email and messaging services that can continue all the way through. Every positive of this pedagogical style can be repeated within an online classroom. So maybe it's an English lesson and they are being given the opportunity to create a magazine or a newspaper. The class can break down into smaller groups with each team having a particular task to complete. They work on those in their teams and then bring that back together to share for the whole class, building to self and peer assessment. It can speed up the process of learning, or it can give a more in-depth look at certain areas. For our integrative pedagogy, thinking again about the fact that an online classroom has more variety, and we're able to then integrate all of those different students, their different cultures, their backgrounds, experiences, and ultimately their goals, to give students a richer learning experience, to allow them to learn from each other as much as from us. So maybe you take some time to not only teach your curriculum content, but also to think about values, to teach about acceptance, about diversity and inclusivity, using experiences from each of your students, thinking about culture and how that has adapted, to learn about each other's medical needs. Students are able to share their information, to share their background, and technology can help us within this. So we can share images, we can share videos, and again have more detailed research available at our fingertips. For reflective pedagogy, again, both teacher and students are able to reflect. We will do this personally, we'll do it independently, but we can show that as a group activity as well, to teach students how to effectively reflect. Maybe we'll ask students their views at the beginning of a session and at the end, and they can reflect on their progress during that time. Constructive feedback will allow them to highlight their own strengths within that. So you can consider it as a task where you think about how confident you are in a new topic at the beginning and at the end, so that every small step can be celebrated. Or we can consider it as part of a knowledge growth and see how students adapt with that information. So maybe in history, you can consider the role of empires, or even the abolishment of slavery, or something along those lines that can be quite emotive. What do you think at the beginning? Here's the information, positive and negative. Now what do you think? How has your views changed? And most importantly, why have those views changed? A benefit of an online classroom here is capturing that information. Being able to record the session and what each student contributes to that. Being able to take screenshots or to save the text chat means that it could be easier to reflect and to see student reflection than if we are just discussing it in a mainstream classroom face-to-face, where students are then saying their answer to you without that being recorded anywhere else. And finally, inquiry-based learning. Again, we can use the online learning structure and the technology to be able to incorporate this. Give a student a question, let them research, collaborate, and then present their answers. So if we go back to science and climate, you're planning for a trip to Antarctica. Students are given a series of questions and problems that they have to prepare for. So maybe they have to choose the best equipment to be able to deal with the climate there, the weather conditions, and the job that they're going to be completing in Antarctica. Just because we are online and unable to get students out of their seats and go into different parts of the room does not mean that they cannot use the same pedagogical styles as they can in a mainstream classroom. So technology is a great support for all types of pedagogy, rather than working against it. We can use technology to improve our teaching, to adapt our pedagogical styles. Whichever form you favour, you're looking for the same outcome. You want the students to engage and to progress. That's the same whether it is mainstream or online. You will want to include a variety of styles. Just as there are different learning styles, your teaching style has to reflect that. Again, having something a little bit different each time means that your student will continue to engage. With online learning, we're able to offer smaller group sizes than many mainstream schools can, which means that each student can engage fuller. They get more attention, they get more time where they have a direct input. They can use the whiteboard all at the same time. Pedagogy can be supported through this. Okay, so let's think about how this can be used in practice, about how we can develop our use of pedagogy in an online setting. 3 steps for this one. First of all, teaching practice. How can we develop teaching practice? How can these styles help us to become better at what we're doing? Think about what you already do. Think about frustrations that you may have had in the past. Reflect on your teaching style. How would an online classroom help you to further develop that? Where we are considering a global support. That can be one way. Being able to reflect on the abilities of others, to watch their lessons, not just within our teaching location, but across the world, can help us to develop best practice. The way that we can share our skills and share our practices means that we're not limited. The world is open. Training from an expert no longer has to rely on who is available near you. If you want to engage with an expert in America, in South Africa, in Russia, you can do all of that through an online setting. We can see the ways in which other people have used pedagogy, have used their teaching to best support their learners. We can complete further reading, we can complete communication amongst these different areas. That is a question which is largely reflective. How can you develop your teaching practice? But our reflection is how we develop. Being able to consider the fact this area wasn't great today. How do I get better? That's our purpose of reflection. Our evaluation doesn't tell us, oh yeah, everything's great, I am the best. It's how can I get better? How can I further improve? Use the opportunity to reflect. Think about whether some of these pedagogies you've not been aware of that can be incorporated in a new way. Think about how technology can support the learning for your students, not just yourself. So how can we better support students? If you have a student who is interested in following a particular field, in heading into a certain direction for their employment, what can you put in place to support that? Do they want to go to study in a UK university? Would it benefit them to have UK learning prior to that? Is there support that can be offered for the students to best prepare them for that situation? Can you see what is commonplace within teaching and learning in the UK to ensure that they understand the system? This again is something which will continue to change. As your students change, the support that they require will change. Does a textbook give them all of the information that they're going to need? Or do they need time to engage with others around the world to think of ways in which the global community is there to support as well? With the rapidly changing world that we live in, can our textbooks now keep up? Does our knowledge keep up? Or do we look to other professionals to support our students in that? And finally, language development. We should, at all times, be learning. I know that the young people that we teach are constantly using words that didn't exist when I was younger, and I am having to learn and adapt to try and figure out what they're talking about. How can we use these different pedagogical areas to develop that for the teacher and for the student? How can they learn from each other? In an online classroom with students from around the world all together, they're able to learn from each other, share elements of their language, of their culture. They build confidence and they build ability. Communication is vital. It's all we have. And so skills are being built. To be able to develop language fully, what do we need to have in place? How can we ensure that that is there? How can each one of these pedagogies help in their own way? And that's the one I really want you to consider as you go further forward, is to choose an element of your teaching practice that could be improved, and consider the ways in which the pedagogy that we choose can make a difference, and whether that's the right difference, or if there are other ways that we can learn from each other and develop through our knowledge and through our communication. Think about your own practice. Think about what you currently do and what you can introduce. Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura, for that insightful sharing. And it's really great to know that we can actually use it is the same thing, the pedagogical approaches, the 5 pedagogical approaches. And you not just explain clearly all the approaches, you also gave us concrete examples on how we can carry them out in our online lessons. So let me okay, there are some questions, Laura.
Yeah.
The challenge, there's a question from Hasrina. The challenge is to use a different medium to use pedagogy.
Yeah.
Or can we use one medium? Oh, okay.
So it's possible to obviously use multiple mediums as we are delivering it. You can have a variety of face-to-face learning and online learning if that suits your needs and the needs of your students. But also to use one medium means that you can become better practiced within that and become more of an expert within that medium itself. So it would depend on your own skills, your own confidence, and ways in which you are more likely to be better supportive for your students. So the resources that you have available, both in terms of physical resources and personal resources, will make the choice for you as to the medium that you'd use.
Okay, moving on to the next question, Laura. Can we use one medium for the different pedagogy?
Yep, that is possible. Every activity could be adapted. So you could have one activity and use all 5 of those pedagogical styles within that one. So it can just depend on, again, your confidence in the planning of that, of experience within it, or maybe asking colleagues to come up with other ideas, because everybody will have a different point to bring to that.
Okay, moving, the next question, what may be the purview of online teaching?
Can you repeat that one, sorry?
What may be the purview of online teaching? I'm I myself not very sure of this question. Okay, can we move on to the next question? Does the new normal redefine pedagogy? In your opinion, does the new normal redefine pedagogy?
Yes and no. So the way in which we tackle that pedagogy, yes. The way in which we can deliver to our learners mean that our activities have to adapt. But pedagogy itself, as the art of teaching, as the way that we are helping learners to progress and to move forward, that's the staple. That stays exactly as it is, regardless of your medium, regardless of the global situation. Pedagogy has to be the same. It's the way that we use it that changes.
All right. What can you give us some examples on in with reference to the situation in UK? How are the teachers coping with this online the use of pedagogy within online education in the schools?
So at the beginning of our lockdowns, where all schools were just very quickly sent home to teach online, it was difficult for mainstream teachers to continue to maintain quality, which is one of the important factors within pedagogy. That meant that the students weren't best supported, that they didn't have the best educational experience. And I know that many students did suffer, losing an interest within education based on the fact that the lessons weren't as engaging. As time has gone on and we've become more used to online learning within the UK, changes did start to be introduced, and teachers adapted very quickly to that situation. Lessons did start having an element of live delivery, so the teacher was still supporting the student, that they had the ability to ask questions and to reflect and to get feedback, which was missing at the beginning. With the move forwards for pedagogy online, it has been something that more people are now prepared for, and something that in general across the UK has been kind of better understood as to how that can be engaged. We have been working on delivery, like I say, for 25 years, and how we're able then to provide an insight to that and support others as well can be something that is considered as we go forwards, to think about obviously still the highest quality of teaching and the best learner outcomes.
Okay.
Okay. So another question that's sent through the chat then is about encouraging educators to reflect. and how we can do that. So again, support of colleagues can be very important for this one. Being able to think about different ways in which that can be monitored as well means that your educators, your teachers know that this is something that will help to develop them. And again, showing the outcome can really help teachers with that one. Knowing that it's the students that benefit from it is quite often enough to make them want to engage and to want them to again further improve. To be able to use student feedback as part of that is also quite beneficial, because it's then a kind of a live response to their teaching, and they get that directly from those that we're trying to improve.
All right, Laura, I'm taking over the TGN for a while. So I actually have several questions, and one of the questions that I'm really interested to talk about is when we talk about pedagogy and when we talk about parents' response towards the current situations. I'm just a little bit curious on how parents in the UK react to this COVID-19 situation, and especially when it comes to online learning. Because in Malaysia, we have our Ministry of Education, they have decided that teachers can decide whether the learning can be done either through online or offline, or combine both. But we also have some parents that they refuse for offline learning. They want it to be online. So how's the situation in the UK, whether parents are more like towards online learning, or whether it's like hybrid where both being combined together at the same time?
I think very much like you, there is a mixed reaction. Again, it changes over time and the situation that we're in. So at the beginning, when the teaching wasn't great, when the pedagogy was not as effective, then parents questioned the quality and whether or not their children were getting the best from that situation. But as time's gone on, we did see more hybrid learning, where some students were in the classroom, the teacher would teach to them and present at the same time to anybody still at home. But that again had its difficulties. There's
Did it
I think
somehow
generally more acceptance.
Did it somehow create like a burnout for the teachers?
It would have been difficult. We obviously, our element of that is completely online. So all of our students were able to continue progression and continue to have that same quality, where parents from some of the mainstream schools are the ones that would be complaining about the fact that that quality wasn't there. So having teachers prepared and trained and confident in using an online platform will allow for more progression for the students and a better quality for them overall.
Okay. So I guess it's a similar response to even in Malaysia as well. All right, Laura Brown, I would like to say thank you very much on behalf of Melta. Once again, thank you very much for the interesting talks on pedagogy. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for listening to Laura Brown, and we look forward to our next sessions in the room. So, thank you very much, everyone. And thank you once again. Thank you, Laura.